On a flight from Dallas to New York, passengers laughed at a shabby-looking man, mocking him as if he didn't belong among them. But when disaster struck thousands of feet above the ground, this same man revealed a truth so shocking that every single person who ridiculed him was forced to stand and salute. This is the story of how a forgotten man became the hero of the sky. The morning sun was rising over Dallas, Texas, painting the airport sky with shades of orange and gold. Inside the terminal, people hurried with their bags, some sipping coffee, others rushing as if the plane would leave without them. The flight from Dallas to New York was packed, buzzing with chatter, laughter, and the endless noise of rolling suitcases. Inside the cabin, the crew moved gracefully from row to row, helping passengers find their seats. The air smelled of fresh coffee mixed with perfume, a normal morning flight with normal people. But then, something unusual happened. The steady rhythm of the boarding process broke when a man stepped into the plane. He was different. His presence seemed out of place, almost like a shadow in the middle of light. He looked to be in his early 50s. His hair was messy, streaked with gray, his face carrying deep lines of fatigue. His blazer was worn out, the kind you'd find at a thrift store, with the fabric fading at the elbows. The top button of his shirt was open, and his old shoes made soft, tired sounds as he walked. His skin looked sun-touched, his eyes heavy with sadness, yet there was something hidden behind them, a depth that no one could see at first glance. This man's name was Daniel Walker. Clutching his ticket, he made his way to seat 17A, by the window. He seemed out of breath, as though life itself had been pressing down on him for years. The woman sitting beside him, dressed in a sharp business suit, pulled out a handkerchief and pressed it to her nose. She gave him a look filled with disgust, as if saying, "What is this man doing here?" Her body leaned away from him, her lips curled, her whole face screaming judgment without words. Behind her, whispers began. Some passengers snickered quietly. Others looked him up and down, as if he were a beggar who had accidentally stumbled onto the wrong flight. From a distance, flight attendant Samantha noticed too. She was young, professional, with neatly tied hair and a bright smile. Except her smile faded when she looked at Daniel. Something about his appearance didn't sit right with her. She walked over and spoke in her polite, professional tone. "Excuse me, sir. Could I please see your boarding pass again?" Daniel didn't argue. He simply smiled calmly, gently, and handed it to her. His voice was steady, almost too calm for someone being judged. "Yes, of course. Here it is." Samantha glanced at the pass, checked the seat number, then at his face again, suspicion still lingering in her eyes. Finally, she nodded and walked away. But her doubt was clear. Daniel said nothing. He placed the pass back into his pocket and turned to look out the window. The sky outside was endless and free. He stared at it with a longing only he understood. Moments later, the man in the aisle seat, tall, loud, and dressed in an expensive suit, groaned in frustration. He waved his hand to call Samantha back. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I can't sit here the whole way to New York. This man smells odd. Please, change my seat." Samantha looked apologetic, but helpless. "I'm so sorry, sir. The flight is completely full. Not a single seat is empty today. I'm afraid you'll have to adjust." The man sighed heavily and sat back down annoyed. He crossed his arms, muttering under his breath about how unfair this was. Through it all, Daniel remained silent, eyes still fixed on the clouds outside, as if none of their words could reach him. The flight continued boarding, and just when the noise seemed to settle, another voice broke the air. "Wait a second, Daniel? Daniel Walker?" Daniel blinked and turned. He didn't recognize the face at first, but then it clicked. A man in his early 50s, with slicked back hair and a shiny watch, was smiling at him from across the aisle. It's me, Mark Evans. We went to high school together. Do you remember? Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, Mark. It's been a long time. Mark laughed loudly, making sure others around could hear. Well, look at you. Back in school, you were always the smart one. Top of the class, first in every exam. Everyone thought you'd go far. And now, he gestured at Daniel's worn blazer and old shoes with mock pity. This? Flying economy, dressed like, well, you know. Meanwhile, look at me, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Living the dream, buddy. His words carried more pride than friendship. Passengers chuckled, shaking their heads. To them, Daniel now looked even smaller, even more pitiful. But Daniel didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just smiled faintly and said, "It's a long story, Mark. Maybe someday I'll tell you. When the time is right." He reached into his bag and pulled out an old, framed pair of glasses. His hands trembled slightly as he held them, but when he placed them on his face, something about him changed. His eyes seemed sharper, as if they belonged to a man who once held the world in his hands. And then it happened. The plane shook lightly. Passengers gasped as turbulence rattled their seats. Samantha's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We are experiencing light turbulence. Nothing to worry about. Please remain seated." For a few minutes, everyone tried to stay calm. But soon, the light shakes grew into violent jolts. The plane dipped slightly, and cries filled the cabin. Mothers clutched their children. People whispered prayers under their breath. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, as though he knew something others did not. Then, the unexpected happened. The cabin door swung open, and Samantha came running out. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "Please," she cried out, her voice breaking. "Is there a doctor on board? It's urgent." Gasps echoed through the cabin. A middle-aged man stood up quickly and said, "I'm a doctor." He rushed toward the cockpit. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The passengers sat frozen, the turbulence shaking them while fear gripped their hearts. The doctor returned, his face grave. His voice was steady, but his words were heavy. The captain has suffered a stroke. He's unconscious. He can't fly the plane." A silence fell so deep, you could hear the hum of the engines. The storm outside grew worse, lightning flashing across the windows, thunder booming in the distance. The co-pilot was struggling alone, and inside the cabin, people's faces turned pale as the weight of reality settled in. Without a captain, they were trapped. Samantha's voice trembled as she picked up the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the situation is very serious. If there is anyone at all, who can fly a plane, please come forward." Every head turned, every heart pounded, but no one moved. The passengers sat frozen in fear, believing they were staring death in the face. And then, slowly, Daniel Walker raised his hand. Gasps filled the cabin the moment Daniel Walker raised his hand. For a heartbeat, the plane seemed to freeze. Then voices erupted all at once. "You?" a man shouted from the back. "This is a joke," cried another. "We're all going to die if he touches the controls," someone else yelled. Even Mark Evans, Daniel's old classmate, jumped to his feet, his face red with panic. "Daniel, what are you doing? You can't even afford decent clothes. And you want to fly a plane? Sit down before you kill us all." The cabin was chaos. Passengers pointed, scoffed, begged for someone else to step forward. Their fear twisted into anger, and Daniel became the target. But Daniel didn't flinch. His hands stayed raised, his eyes calm, his voice steady when he spoke. "I can fly this plane. I've done it before." Samantha, trembling, stepped closer. "Sir, are you serious? Do you really have flight experience?" Daniel looked her straight in the eye. His words were quiet, but they carried weight. "Yes, it's been 10 years since I last flew, but I was a captain. If you let me try, I can get us out of this." For the first time since the turbulence began, silence swept across the cabin. There was something about his tone, a confidence that made even the loudest voices go still. From the cockpit, the struggling co-pilot shouted, "If someone has experience, send them now. I can't manage this storm alone." Daniel stood, and in that moment, everything about him shifted. The tired, shabby man they mocked now walked with a steady stride. His back straightened, his steps were firm, and his eyes carried the sharpness of a man who once ruled the skies. Whispers filled the plane as he passed down the aisle. Some passengers hung their heads in shame. Others prayed silently. Even the businesswoman who had covered her nose earlier now lowered her gaze, regret heavy on her face. Mark sat frozen, his pride crushed, his mocking words echoing back at him. He wanted to speak, but all he could manage was a whisper. "Daniel, what have I done?" Daniel entered the cockpit. The co-pilot, young and overwhelmed, looked up in shock. "Who are you?" he demanded. Daniel slid into the captain's chair, his hands brushing the controls like an old friend. "My name is Captain Daniel Walker," he said firmly. "Once they called me the Lion of the Skies." The co-pilot's eyes widened. He had heard the name. Everyone in aviation had. 20 years ago, Daniel Walker was a legend. A man who once landed a plane with over 300 passengers in the middle of a raging storm, saving every single life on board. But 10 years back, a tragic mechanical failure had ended differently. Though it wasn't his fault, Daniel was suspended, disgraced, and forgotten. The co-pilot's voice cracked. I know that name. You're..." Daniel cut him off gently. "Right now, I'm just a man trying to get us all home. Let's work together." He strapped on the headset, his fingers dancing across the control panel with precision. His voice was calm, commanding, the voice of a man born to lead. "New York Control, this is Captain Daniel Walker. Our pilot is down, requesting immediate clearance for emergency landing." For a moment, silence. Then the control tower responded, almost stunned. "Captain Walker, we read you." "Sir, it's an honor. You're cleared. Follow our instructions." Outside, lightning ripped through the sky, and thunder roared so loud the cabin shook. Rain pounded against the windows, the storm determined to tear the plane apart. Inside the cockpit, Daniel's hands were steady as stone. He maneuvered the aircraft with a grace the co-pilot had never seen. Every adjustment was smooth, every instruction followed perfectly. His calm spread through the cockpit like fire, turning panic into focus. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, passengers whispered the truth to each other. "Did you hear? He's not a beggar. He's Captain Walker." The Captain Walker? The legend! "Oh my God," we mocked him. The same mouths that had laughed at him now trembled in shame. The businesswoman wiped tears from her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude for the very man she had insulted. Mark sat frozen, his chest heavy with regret. He bowed his head, whispering to himself, "I was wrong, Daniel. I was so wrong." Minutes felt like hours as the storm raged on. The plane dipped, rose, and shook violently, but Daniel remained unshaken. His voice filled the cockpit. "Hold steady. We've got this." And then, through sheer skill and courage, Daniel guided the aircraft down. Slowly, carefully, the wheels touched the runway at JFK Airport. The landing was so smooth, so perfect, that not a single passenger felt a jolt. For a moment, there was silence. Then cheers, applause, tears. The cabin erupted with cries of relief, gratitude, and admiration. When Daniel stepped out of the cockpit, His face was calm, his eyes tired but proud. The passengers who had looked at him with disgust now stood with their heads bowed. The businesswoman who had once covered her nose whispered, "I'm so sorry," tears rolling down her cheeks. Mark rushed forward, his arrogance gone. His voice broke as he said, "Daniel, you were always the best. I mocked you, but today, you saved us all. I can't ever repay this." Daniel placed a hand on his old classmate's shoulder and gave a faint smile. "It was never about winning or losing, Mark. I only lost one thing, my confidence. Today, I found it again." As the passengers filed out of the plane, an airline official pushed his way through the crowd. He looked at Daniel with awe and respect. "Captain Walker, we tracked your performance live. The board watched every move. On behalf of the airline, we would be honored to have you back." The cabin went silent, all eyes on Daniel. He looked out the window, at the storm now fading into a calm, blue sky. His voice was quiet but powerful when he replied, "They took away my job years ago, but they never took away my spirit. My wings were clipped, but my heart never stopped flying." Tears welled in the eyes of passengers. Without being asked, one by one, they stood. Slowly, every single passenger in that cabin rose to their feet and clapped. The sound grew louder and louder until it filled the entire plane. And then, in unison, they saluted him. The man they once mocked, now their savior. Daniel Walker, the forgotten legend, had become a hero once more. Because true worth isn't found in clothes, status, or wealth. True worth is found in courage. And on that stormy morning flight, courage wore the face of a man everyone had once ignored. Friends, never judge someone by how they look. You never know the battles they fought, or the greatness they carry inside. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.